Hello and welcome to Decorate It. My name is Mary and this is Wes. And tonight's episode is about G-Urushi. Gurushi, as Wes calls it. Episode 35. Can you believe that we've gotten to 35 episodes? It feels like we started this like yesterday. Just literally just boom, we're here. But yeah, so the 35th episode decided to talk about G-Urushi. It's not a technique that I know how to do.
We've never done it.
We've never done it. I know how to do it. I know the steps that's involved with it.
Just gonna be honest.
Just have never actually physically done it. And usually I don't like to talk about things that I haven't like put my hands on or tried or attempted to do, but we're going to talk about it because it's one of those, I feel like it's kind of a lost art as far as the decorative stuff is concerned.
Not many people do it as much. And it could be because of all the safety that you need to take to do it.
There's a lot of safety considerations whenever you're doing it in the proper way, I guess, if you would say it, if you're using the actual abalone shells. But as far as the technique, I do believe that Captain G was the one who actually came up with it, and he's from Bloody Decks. He's got a whole post, like if you type in G-Urushi rod building, you'll come up with, there'll be a couple different like tutorials, and Captain G shared one of his, and as far as I know, he's the originator of it. And then there was another one I found that was a little bit easier to understand because there was a pictures attached to it, and it was by Sean. Don't know Sean's last name, but he posted it on West End Anglers, which is a website. Once again, if you type in G-Urushi, stick rod building at the end of it, just so it literally goes to just that, because you'll also get the Japanese technique with the Urushi lacquer and of that nature, and I'm not sure if it was, a tag onto that because I don't know much about that technique, but I'm assuming it's kind of connected, if you will. But Sean put out kind of a tutorial with pictures, and I want to share his tutorial. So if you want to follow it up, being able to see the pictures with what he did with the steps, you can look on that West End Anglers website, and it's a forum. So rodbuilding.org has a couple mentions of it as well. So there's information out there. There's just not a ton of it, if you will, but the information is accurate and it's good, and it's basically what you do. So the first thing that you have to do is you want to apply a coat of finish to the blank, because the abalone shells, if you're using true abalone, the bottom side of the shells is very abrasive. So you really don't want that like rubbing up against your blank no matter how it's being done. So you're going to put a coat of finish on it, and you're going to let that dry. Obviously, you can apply your abalone shells like as it's starting to set up, but then they're going to slide around and they're going to do some funny stuff. So
Risk falling
off, maybe getting too unlevel or something of that nature. So it's better to let that coat dry and then come back with super glue and attach those shells. Now, the biggest thing with the shells is, one, anytime you're working with abalone and you're cracking it, you're breaking it, you're sanding it, you have to have a respirator. That stuff is extremely toxic. So this entire process, do not try it without a respirator. End of story. Even would be great for you to have a respirator and some sort of vacuum to be sucking up the dust that's coming off of it when you're working with it. Take those shells, break them up into small pieces. You don't want them to be really, really big, because that just means that you're going to have to spend extra time sanding, because we do have to get it back to a level sort of field, if you will. Obviously, we want level epoxy. We don't want waves and chunks and all this other stuff. And place them just randomly around the area that you're going to be putting the technique G-Urushi on, okay? Once you have those super glued in place with the abrasive, the bottom side of the shell facing down, you're going to, I'm going to make sure I'm not lying to y'all, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you're going to attach that. So after they're attached and everything's set up and dried, which super glue it's real quick, then you're going to take pigmented epoxy. You can also use lacquer paint, another thing that's kind of extremely toxic. Once again, respirator for this entire ordeal, but pigmented paint is also, or pigmented epoxy works really well as well. And what you do is you just mix it into your epoxy, and you really want to just saturate this whole thing. Make sure it gets underneath all of the shells. It's in kind of like the cracks and stuff. And the whole idea is to be sloppy with this, because as it dries, you want it to be dripping off of it, because you've got to build layers of this stuff for it to work. Okay. And then let that dry. Then you're going to come back with another pigmented epoxy, apply that as messily, let it drip, do the whole thing all over again. You can do as many levels of this as you want. The cool thing about it is this is kind of like marbling. You're never going to get it the exact same way twice. Same thing with tigers. You're never going to get it the exact same way twice, because it's always going to just, do whatever it decides to do. And once you get however many levels of the pigmented epoxy on there and they're cured, now it's time to sand it. Now, you really want to make sure that before you start sanding that epoxy is ready to sand. Depending on where you are, depending on what temperatures you are. It could be 24 hours and you might be able to go ahead and start sanding.
Could be 7 days later.
Could be 7 days later. So if your fingernail can indent the epoxy, you can't sand yet. Because all that's going to happen is that the sandpaper is going to get hot against the epoxy. It's going to gum up and then it's going to start doing some crazy stuff. And you don't want that to happen. So start with anywhere between 80 to 100 grit. And the goal is to take off all of the sharp edges, get everything rounded, kind of uniform, and really start to get it somewhat level, okay? Once you've got it pretty smooth, clean it off. They suggested using denatured alcohol to clean everything off. We can't use acetone because that's going to just strip the epoxy. And I'm sure isopropyl probably would work as well, but they specifically said denatured for both Captain G and Sean. So I'm going to just say that use denatured. I use it when I clean up the glue half the time because sometimes the isopropyl won't take the glue off.
No.
And sometimes it will. But when it does it, I go and get the DNA. Then between 150 to 200, then you're going to actually start trying to like really shape this thing. Now, as you get through it, you're going to finish at 500. 500 to 600 is what they were suggesting. Do not stress if you've still got some kind of like waves and everything's not quite uniform yet. If you have some
Good.
If you have some kind of like dimples and stuff, little pools, if you will, where it's not quite the same level as everything else, you can come back with another coat of clear and just kind of focus on those little dip areas. And once that's cured, then we're going to start really trying to finish it in there. But the goal is to get all that pigmented epoxy off the top of the abalone shell so the pretty shell shows through, and then focus on getting it super, super level. You can work with veneers, but because veneers are so thin, you really got to be careful what kind of veneer you're working with because, you know, if you get sanding too far into it, they turn really nasty and ugly. And once you're happy with how your finish and the shells and everything's looking, that's when you start to add the trims at the end to kind of finish it off. And then 1 or 2 to 3, whatever your final coats is going to be to make it shiny. And that's the whole technique. But there's so much sanding, there's so much cutting with the abalone shells, if you're using that in particular, that respiratory. You got to have a respirator. You know, like you've got to have respiratory. You got to protect the respiratory
system.
You got to protect the respiratory system with a respirator. So that's super, super important. That's the basics to it. Now, granted, this technique is obviously going to add weight. Most of these guys aren't putting it on bass rods. They're not, unless they're trying to make the back end, you know, bottom heavy or what's the, it's not butt heavy. Thank you. I was thinking make the back big back butt. They're putting it on heavers. They're putting on these, you know, boat rods, things that it's really not going to really affect it. But it is going to add, Sean said specifically, a couple ounces of weight. So, and you don't have to be limited to just abalone shells. You can also use oyster shells. A friend of mine's starting to work with stones, and that one that I've seen that he's doing looks amazing. So you can definitely, whatever you can basically sand down to shine up and look really good is going to work for that technique. I personally haven't done it because I've always had kids in the shop until this year. And do you know how hard it is to try to get a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old to wear a respirator while they're running around the shop watching TV? It's almost impossible. Not to mention that the respirator doesn't exactly fit the way it's supposed to on their faces anyway. So I just kind of steer clear of even trying it just for fun.
Yeah.
Just because of that. Obviously, this is one of those techniques it's going to take some time. You know, you're looking at like 2 weeks probably for start to finish on this particular section. You might be able to, you know, bump it up quicker depending on if, you know, you set your stuff to dry at like 78 or 80 degrees and you walk out, or if you can live and work in that environment, then sure. But I'm not trying to work while it's 80 degrees in the shop either. I like my AC. But that's mainly why I haven't tried it, is just because I've always had kids in the shop and it's just been not feasible for us to even do it. Not to mention the abalone itself. Not that it scares me, but just that I know that it's so toxic that it's like, how long does that sit in the air if I don't actually have a way to
proper dust collection and fresh air system?
Yeah, like we've got a what is that thing called now?
It's air filtration.
We have air filtration, but obviously it's not pulling everything out. And, it does better. It helps with pulling the contact cement smell out of here,
A
but
little bit, yeah.
it's not amazing. It's not like top grade what I would want to be working with. I mean, and if you've got one of those tables, what are the tables called? They suck the stuff straight down where you're working on it. You know what I'm talking about? While you're standing, it's supposed to pull everything straight down instead of it going all over the place.
Yeah, you can do that with any of them with a proper dust collection system.
So it's just part of the dust collection system. Okay, well.
You can just rig anything up that way. You can do your lathe. You can do...
That's what I need to do. I need to get a dust collection
There's
system properly installed.
It's just a bunch of PVC running around the shop that...
Yeah, a lot of tubing and or hookups and moving the actual system around. But it's a nifty technique. We didn't have, like I said at the beginning, it's kind of a dying art. Not that many people actually are doing it, and if they're doing it, they're not posting it where a whole lot of people can see it.
Yeah.
You can go on Google and you'll see a bunch of images where people have posted it randomly on a bunch of different websites, or Pinterest has picked up some, but I don't see it on the actual groups
Right.
on Facebook, which, obviously Facebook's not the end all be all, but you just don't see it. It's not a very common technique. And it probably has a lot to do with not only the toxicity, but the weight value, because everybody's moving towards like lighter weight. It has to be lighter.
Do you know where most people can find abalone shells and things of that sort?
The actual shells themselves. You know what? I didn't look into that. I know that Kevin Knox sells his veneers that are the true abalone shells. But I'm sure with just a quick Google search, you probably could actually find it. I know the good quality ones are the ones that are coming out of China. Is it China?
I don't think so.
I don't remember. Can you look that up? Find out where they can actually find them. I'm sure you can get on Amazon. I swear, Amazon is like the only place you can order like just about everything.
Looks like, yeah, as soon as you type in abalone shells for sale, there's several like seashell supplies and
Like vendors.
Mhm.
Where are they normally located?
On the coast.
On the coast.
It looks like everyone is
Just somewhere near the
towards
ocean.
the coast, yeah.
So I guess if you live on the coast, you actually might be able to collect it yourself if you know what kind of shells to look for.
The Seashell Company sells them.
Okay. Just remember, break them up into small little pieces. You kind of want to make it look like a little mosaic, if you will. And then don't do too big of chunks because you do have to sand it back down. Make sure the abrasive side, which is the bottom part of the shell, the ugly part of the shell, is what you're sanding away. I'm sorry, I think I said that wrong earlier. You want the abrasive side of it facing away because you want to sand through it so that you can see the actual pretty shell itself.
It looks like it's ranging, $13 to $30 depending on what you're looking for a shell.
For just a single shell?
Yeah.
Oh, that's kind of expensive.
But the shells are like...
Well, yeah, they're pretty big. Because we can find some at the beach occasionally. They're very broke up, but you can at least get pieces and parts.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder how those, the real thin clam shells, the ones that are they look like, we call them, not the angel wing ones, but they look like tubes, but they fold apart like the angels do. And they're really pretty. They're really thin, so you probably have to be really careful not to sand
Sounds like you need to try it.
into them, but I wonder how they would do, because they kind of have that iridescent kind of value to them too.
Yeah, sounds like you need to try it.
Yeah, have to go collecting shells at the beach and see what happens. So anything that we could sand, we could use this technique with. I mean, step outside the box a little bit. Maybe we don't want to do the abalone. Maybe we want to try, I don't know, giant rhinestones or, the stones like opals and, that stuff that they use in rings that would be really cool, like turquoise. So we could kind of...
Just put diamonds in it. It's fun.
Yeah. Put diamonds, put gold fleck, do the whole shebang. All right. So we have one person that contributed to photos from the Southern Rod Builders tonight. Jordan Duran is actually the person that put his work in, and I'm going to zoom in on this so we can really appreciate the work that's involved in this. Okay. So obviously that's the abalone shell, and the white into black is the pigmented color. And as I said earlier, you can use lacquer paint. It's extremely toxic as well. But you see how he's kind of broken this up? It looks like one of those rocks, like almost marbling, if you will. What's one of the ones that the oldest likes to break apart? What are they called?
Oh, geodes.
The geodes, thank you. It kind of looks like it has a
I was
geode.
like, what are you talking about?
He likes to break those rocks apart. We buy him like geodes by the bucket, and he's like, oh, he smashes them with a hammer. Here's another example. One of these, I think it was this one, is oyster shells, and that's like after he's got it like with the clear coat on it, before he's got the tie offs on it. So it's a really pretty look. Like, it looks really good, but it is definitely a labor of love with this technique, 100%. And I would be eager to try it. I mean, and you could definitely use this as like a counterweight, for instance. You know, like if you need to have it butt heavy,
Right.
you could add that to the rod. Obviously, you would need to test it to see how much weight you're adding whenever you do it, so you know how much it would affect, you know, the weight of the butt if you were trying to make it butt heavy. But you know, it's a good way to balance. It's also a different way to look at things. And if you want to I just thought of it in my brain, you don't necessarily have to do it over the entire split. Maybe this could be something that you work on like a thread wrap area.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you shrink it to where it's just isolated in one little section. So it's not adding as much weight over the whole thing. Granted, yeah, it's a lot of work for a little itty bitty little 1 to 2 inch piece.
You could probably do it as the butt, too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like that be the actual butt.
Mm-hmm.
Do it over you could do it over lighter wood, so you would actually be just balancing it kind of thing. A lot of different ways that you probably could incorporate it. So it's a really cool technique. Do you shape the back of the shell to suit the rod blade? Duncan, I would assume so. You know, when I've seen photos of people in progress with it, I mean, they got the thing jutted up, but you do kind of want it to be.
Well, you want small enough pieces that you may not have to do that.
Yeah, you know, like break them up small. Like we're not doing big chunks, you know, like we want to do little itty bitty. Think like mosaic tiles, like little squares that they stick together to make the pretty thing. Like you want little like chips, if you will.
1/2 inch, 1/4 inch.
Something.
That area.
Not big pieces, unless you've got like a shell that is actually really flat in that section, and then you could probably pull it off to where it wouldn't have to do that. But I would thinking, you know, if you're trying to get it to go around the curve, maybe doing a little sanding to concave it, or is it concave, concur? Which one is it?
I don't know.
The one that would hug the blank, sand it in that manner.
You could probably take a Dremel and do it if you needed to.
Yeah. Well, I would almost bet that you could use the Dremel to take most of the shell down, and it'd probably be a lot faster than trying to
A lot thinner.
sand everything. As long as you had like a good tool rest to use to keep your hand steady. And it would definitely be something I would use, not like doing the strips and sanding it, because with the uneven pressures, you would sand unevenly. You definitely would want to have one of the, what are they called? The blocks, the sanding blocks or something of that nature, so that you would make sure it stayed level while you're working on it. The size of the blank determines the size of the shell. I think in Jordan's, like, I like those little itty bitty, like, kind of pieces that he had thrown in with the bigger shell.
Yeah.
Down towards the bottom of one of those pictures. I think that looked really good, where you just, you know, and it's a freelance thing. You just kind of slap those things wherever you want to, and then you're like, poof, and see what happens. And then the curiosity of adding whatever pigmented epoxy you put on top of it, like I said, everyone that I have seen, I've really liked, because it had that kind of, it looks like granite, or it looks like a stone, or like an ocean, or something. Like, it looks really pretty. So the more I talk about it, the more I want to go try it. But I don't have it. I don't have any abalone. I have to try. I guess next year I'll have to order some abalone shells and just see what happens. Play with it on PVC first and kick the dogs out of the shop so they're not getting abalone dust in their lungs. But I'll have to research how long that stuff actually sits in the air before it settles. I'm assuming it's like any other dust particle. You know, 6 hours you should be in the clear, maybe. I don't know. Because like I said, I haven't actually physically done it. I just can tell you that I know that Captain G posted one of his tutorials on Bloody Decks. And
BDOutdoors.com.
Yep. And then Sean, which is the one that I kind of wrote down for notes to kind of give you guys basically how to do it, is on West End Anglers. There's another one on, this one's not really a step-by-step, but it was just a discussion of how to do it, and it's on rodbuilding.org. And those are the 3 places I've seen actual tutorials from my research, if you will. I was trying to remember if I saw anything else. And then I saw a bunch of photos. Obviously, if you typed in G-Urushi rod building and you hit images, a whole bunch of photos would come up with it. I think I saw 10 right off the bat, and I didn't go in and like click on each individual one, but a lot of those are on rodbuilding.org. So it's a good place to at least get some inspiration for how the final look is. But just know it's messy when you're doing it, because Sean specifically said if it's not dripping, you're not doing it right. You don't have enough pigmented epoxy on there. So it's one of those, like, you basically got to lay that stuff on there really heavy. Also, the colored epoxy isn't the same stuff you use for marbling.
It can be.
It can be, but most of that stuff looks like, some people use mica powder. You know, it's a little bit more translucent, but it gives it a slight hint. You can also probably use acrylic paint mixed into it. You could probably...
the acrylic paint will thicken the epoxy quickly.
Yeah, that might not be the best way to do that.
You definitely want the actual, like, pigment.
I wonder how the alcohol dyes would do.
They tend to lose their opaqueness, so to speak.
But if you're doing, like, multiple layers, it might be okay.
Might be. I would stick to the pigments, or, like, marbling pigments would work well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you want something that's going to stay runny, because, like you said, you got to get that stuff into all of those cracks and crevices, because the idea is to completely cover that abalone with all that different layers, however many colors you're putting on there with that epoxy. And if you don't cover it to be able to sand that back down through it, you're not going to have that abalone seated in that background, if you will. So you really got to make sure that you have the longevity of it. So I don't think I would recommend the acrylic paint, because, like, I've seen your stuff gum up real fast.
Real fast if you're not careful.
Works really good for marbling, but not for, like, trying to stick into...
Get it to coat.
Stick it into holes and crevices and cracks. It'd be like... It'd be like mason work with it.
Yeah.
Ooh, I wonder how that would do. If you did a thicker acrylic one, and then took a bunch of those, like, the mosaic tiles keep coming back in my head because I've seen so many. Stick them in. Like, just make a mosaic pattern with the tiles.
Could do it.
I don't know. That's Alice working for you. Want to go ahead and talk about the product of the night tonight. Gift cards. So obviously, Christmas is in a week and a half, a little less. And for anybody watching this that's not a rod builder or wants to gift a rod builder or something, or you're a rod builder, or you're friends with a rod builder, or you want stocking stuffers, this is the perfect thing to use.
Or if you're like anyone in my family that goes, I don't know what I want, and you're that type of person, tell them you want a gift card.
Ta-da! Gift certificate. So these things are immediately emailed to you as soon as you purchase them. And then they can be or you can have it emailed to the person, or you can keep it and then transfer it to the person so they don't know about it. And they can be bought in increments from $25, $50, $75, $100, all the way up to $500. So this is definitely a great stocking stuffer, or I don't know what to get for one of my friends. Hey, get them a gift certificate to Mudhole, because we're always going to need supplies.
You will spend it.
You'll spend it, and they've been having amazing sales for the last couple of weeks. I'm sure they're probably going to do some more end of the year sales. I don't know for a fact, but they have been pumping out some massive sales in the last months, and it's been awesome. I've spent more than I should have, because it's like, oh, buy one get one, sure, I'll take 3 of those or 4 of those, and and you're like, crap, I just spent more than I was planning on today. Now I gotta make that back up. But gift cards are great. And, if you got friends that are looking into getting into rod building and you feel like giving them a Christmas present, or if it's just a present just in general, it doesn't have to be Christmas. It could be birthday, anniversary, friendship, whatever. Gift cards. Those are always available. They're never going to expire. As far as, I don't think they have an expiry date when you buy them, but obviously you're going to use it pretty soon. Get a gift card. And on that, I want to also take a minute and to thank our sponsors, Foundation Outdoor Group. And I want to remind everybody that on the 17th, they have their final video of the year, which is talking about epoxy and applying epoxy. And that is usually everybody's biggest question on how to get level epoxy. So that's definitely one of the episodes to stay tuned to, which is this December. But yeah, it's this coming Tuesday. But it's at 6:30, and you can ask them real questions in real time about the epoxy, what's the pros and cons, and all that stuff. And obviously Hunter and Chris are going to tell you how to do it
and give away stuff.
At the same time. I also want to thank them for this entire past year. It's been awesome traveling, having fun, and look forward to teaching the Mudhole classes the end of January for the advanced classes that got moved because of Hilton. And Milton. I keep renaming him every time I say it. First time
Hilton,
it was
Milton.
Milton that decided to show his head. Last thing I want to say is that the rod building challenge for Mudhole is still going on. If you're coming to the expo in February, which is the 22nd and the 23rd, you can bring your challenge rod to the expo, so you can actually get a couple extra weeks if you're coming to the expo to finish your builds. If you're not, they need to have it shipped to them by February 3rd. Those blanks are still for sale. There's still time for you to get in and actually get these things built. And I implore you to try the challenge, regardless of where you feel that you are on your level, because the challenge is open for everybody. And many times that Wes and I have discussed it, that is where we started to improve, because we could actually get real feedback as to what we did wrong and how we needed to improve. And we didn't realize how valuable that information was at the time, but it definitely pushed us on the right path to being able to make better rods.
Right.
So now we are also going to open this up to Q&A at this point in time, because it's a very short episode. We only had those 3 photos. It's a technique I don't know a whole ton about, and I don't like to discuss and go on a rant about things I don't know, because I don't know. I don't know I don't know how to do it. I don't know. I mean, I know this. It's weird because I know how to do it, but I haven't physically done it, so I don't feel confident in going, oh well, it's this way, and then it goes this way, and then like. I don't like to ramble on about things I haven't got experience in. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. It could be anything about rod building related. Also, 2 weeks from now, we're going to have a final podcast, episode 36, for the end of the year. That will also feature an amazing giveaway.
We haven't decided yet what it's on. We've got to talk to Mudhole, but
that giveaway, y'all are going to
You'll want to watch that video.
That one's going to be better than the 3 dryer. I'm going to tell you that. We actually were trying to give away the quad dryer that you could put up on the wall.
Yeah, and there was only one left in stock.
There was only one left, and I didn't want to take a chance of it getting sold out before we could talk to them on Monday. So I was like, let's just wait. So, but it'll be an awesome one for that. And I'm not sure. I think probably what we'll do is the year, discussing all of the things.
Year in review,
like we did last year, because I think that was kind of fun. When doing the inlay grips like the turtle, do you have a solid piece under the pattern? Can you still wrap it around the grip if done this way? So like building on top of a solid, I mean, you can, but mine don't.
No.
I'll show you one that is glued.
You can do it that way, but then you get into more trouble trying to wrap it, because now you're having to double your top layer to reach around.
So this little dude is not glued. This is a demo that was actually cut for Mudhole's classes. You're not going to Mudhole. Here's
That's eventually going on one of my rods.
Not this one.
Well,
this was one of the other ones. So, little sharp dude. Little, that's the back.
Kind of basic.
Little basic, 2-color. This isn't the final one. We're using a different one, black background with blue and green, I believe is what you're
No, I think that was the final.
No, the final one I glued. I just don't know where I put it right now.
Oh, okay.
But there's no background to this, okay? Because we have to wrap 3 millimeters around a core. I don't know how much of that you can actually hear with me not being at the mic, but you have to wrap this around a core and then sand it down. So we have to take into consideration that we only have 3 millimeters to work with. If we build a base underneath of it to where you could glue it down to a flat surface, now your core also has to shrink down even more, which as you turn that core, my EVA is dumb dense. It's super dense. It's like a rock when it hits you.
It's close to working with a soft wood.
Kind of, yeah.
It's pretty close.
I actually had to start wearing a face shield for the pieces that fly off when I'm turning it, because those things would smack me. I'd have my safety glasses on because that was fine. They'd smack me in the face, and I'd have a whelp from how fast and it was just the hardness that was coming off. So I've moved to face shield because that stuff stings. But
why doesn't your class go in depth on that process as well?
The one course I have goes in depth on process of how I cut them with the Cricut. That one's on the Cricut, right, with the Cricut, but for the graffiti style that I did, and it walks you through all that steps. There'll be another one coming out where it's more of a starter, like a beginner kind of one, where you can either use the jeweler saw or you can use an X-Acto blade, and with a simpler design, something closer to this, not quite as intricate as the EVA or the graffiti. What I was trying to say is if you turn that core more shallow, right? Because the core and this almost have to be the exact size that the end grip is going to be. So your outer diameter, if you turn that core smaller to accommodate a base layer that you stuck on there, right? Now that core is no longer very stable because it doesn't matter how dense the EVA is. As soon as you start peeling it down to its very, very thin, it could rip when you're trying to take it off the mandrel. So I haven't tried it that way. It's just an unnecessary depth, if you will. Yes, the thickness would create the problem. You'd also have problems with it trying to make that turn.
Yeah, because then you'd have an extra layer pushing out on the.
Yeah, because even with these, no matter how amazing they get glued in there, when they go to make that turn and dry, the seams will try to pry apart. And that's where, when Rick Payne shared that tip with me with the cling wrap, if you've got a seam that seems open, like really open, you can dump more contact cement into that spot and just wrap the hell out of it so it squeezes back into itself. And it's a wet glue, which obviously contact cement's not made to do it that way, but it works and it will hold. But you have to allow it to dry like 24 30 hours before you can start to work with it again. Mm-hmm. And even then, you got to be really careful. If your contact cement's trying to kick off, also, like it's starting to get to the end of its shelf life because you left the can open too long, it will also take longer for it to set up than a fresh can. What?
Talking about yourself there.
I am talking about myself. I will flat out, I'll throw myself under the bus all the time. I have screwed up many grips because my contact cement was past its expiration date and I was trying to use the last of it and it bit me in the butt quite a few times. If it starts to gel up, don't trust it.
Don't
trust it. What is your sanding pattern for inlay grips? If I'm sanding a block that I've glued together, not an inlay or an overlay, not any of this. If I'm sanding a block where I've glued the joints together like an abstract or trims or any of that nature, I will actually start at 150 with mine because the EVA is so dense, and I'll take the 150 until about 3/4 of the width that I want it to be in the outer diameter. Then I'll go to 240. 240 will shape it pretty much for up until 99% to the outer diameter I want, and then I might hit it with 320. I don't even have to do that half the time. But my final pass on it is a wet sand, basically, with the magic eraser and water. And that is just to get that EVA dust that has transferred from one color to another off of the grip and kind of clean it up a little bit. And that's pretty much what I do. If I'm working with these overlays or any inlay that I've dug out and stuck into the grip like I did with the graffiti, I don't start with 150. I start with 240 and I baby it. And I use 240 most of the time until it gets to about the final pass, and then I'll pass over it a couple times with 320 and then the magic razor. And the 240 is like very gentle pressure. As soon as I make sure there's no rip outs or anything like that, then I'll start to put a little bit of pressure onto it, but I never dig into those because even though the glue joints are solid, the more you heat up like contact cement, you can open those joints back up. So if you notice your grip's getting hot or you're starting to see separations, just stop. Do not move forward. Leave it on the mandrel. Slam it back together. Let it cool down. Move, and then you can start sanding again. But just know that as soon as that seam opened up and you've slammed it back together, it's better to let it sit for 4 hours, 2 to 4 hours. Because if you try to do it, and I experience, speaking from experience, if you try to push it because you're trying to get it done, that seam will just keep popping back open. And it's just, bleh, it's aggravating. The abstracts that I pumped out like last month that I called the cotton candy abstracts, I started to work on them. I told you guys I was working on it, and then the seams kept blowing up. And so I put them to the side. I let them set for till the next day and sanded them down, and I had no issues out of them. But the same day that I glued them up and tried to turn them 2 hours later, I kept having seams pop open. And I was like, I'm done trying to repair this. Like, I'm done. And so I just let them sit, and they were fine. Magic eraser. They're, what are they called? What's the word on Amazon? They're melamine foam. Mm-hmm. It's a magic eraser is a little white scrubby that you're supposed to spray water on, and you can basically clean anything inside of your house. I think
melamine.
It's melamine. If you go on Amazon and look up melamine. Mine. So MELAMINE.
Yes.
You can actually order it a lot cheaper than you can get in the stores.
You can get a 100 pack for $22.
And you can use them You can use one of those multiple times. No, it's basically like a wet sand, but it's a cleaning it as it sands. It's also the same stuff I recommend to clean up EVA grips with when they get really nasty and dirty. That's the same. You can spin the rod while using that, wipe it back and forth a couple times, and the grip looks brand new. So we are going to head out, and I hope you learned a new technique tonight or something that you can look into and try. The G-Urushi technique is definitely a loving, time-consuming, a little bit of extra work to do it. You know, definitely give yourself somewhere between 5 to maybe 14 days to get that side of project done. And also keep in mind it's going to add weight. You can use it to your advantage. If you need to have a butt-heavy rod, or, you know, if it's on a heaver or something of that nature, boat rod, then it's not really going to matter on those per se. But be safe. That's the biggest thing about it when you're working with the abalone. It is toxic. It is highly toxic. It's not touching the shells. The shells themselves are fine, but when you start to sand into the shells, that's when it becomes toxic. So that dust, respirator. Don't be trying to do it in 95 mask. That's not going to work. You're still going to get sick. Don't do that. Obviously, don't have friends or family or animals in the shop with you or where you're sanding while that's happening either, because unless you're going to slap respirators on them. Try it out, and if you happen to need further assistance, remember Captain G at BD Outdoors, which is Bloody Decks, that forum. Do believe that he is the original creator of it. He shared how he was doing it with the lacquer paint, and then Sean has his own West End Anglers. I don't know Sean's last name, but he shared it where he was doing the pigmented epoxy, and it has pictures attached to it. I couldn't see pictures on Captain G's. It was like they got removed or something. It had a little broken line in between them. And then rodbuilding.org also has a post, or what do they call it? Is it a post in there? It's not really a post. It's more like a topic kind of thing.
Thread.
A thread. It has a thread in there. Discussion. A couple people inserted some information, but have fun with it. Try it. If you do it before I will, which you probably will, because I'm not going to be able to get to it for the next 4 months probably. Share it with me. I'd love to see people's progress on this stuff. If you picked it up and you got the idea from here, or inspired or whatever, I'd love to see it. I like to see people thriving and trying new techniques, or just doing better because they got a little bit of info that they didn't have prior. So thanks for hanging out with us tonight. We do appreciate it, and we'll talk with you later. Bye.